All right, so as always, what the hell are we going to do for the cold open?
I don't know, but it's got to be extra cold this time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's got to be frosty.
So I was thinking, like, what if they got, like, a hiking certificate for just, like, living in Russia? Is that funny at all?
I don't know. I don't know if it's freezy.
It's
It's got to be
freezy?
cold.
It's cold enough?
Icy.
I guess you don't like that. What if they're like, oh, you named the pass after me? That's nice.
Too high of a temperature for.
Okay, I feel like you're getting hung up on the cold part of the cold open.
Cold open, more like freezing open. Gotta be cold. Gotta be colder than cold.
I think, you know what? Actually, you're listening to Anomalous. Fuck it. Welcome to Anomalous, everybody. Did you like our way of not thinking of a cold open?
I actually thought of that cold open.
You thought of it?
Yeah.
I was going to be all sad.
Yeah, you were going to get real dark with it.
Yeah, I had some sad ideas for sure.
And this was my only idea other than singing Let It Go from Frozen.
Yeah, not really the tone.
And it was a winner, though.
To be clear, not the one where you're singing from Frozen.
Yeah, but my first idea.
I'm sure you'll shoehorn it in there.
That's called being a comedic genius. Mm-hmm. And I'm Spooky Maddie, you're a comedic genius.
Well, do you have any Dutch ovening, douchebagging, or discrediting to do this morning?
Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that I'm Spooky Maddie again, just so you know that. And you're listening to Anomalous, where we talk about all things that is scary in life. And we'll get there. We'll get to all the scary things in life.
If you've ever been afraid of something big or small, one day we'll have an episode on it.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. And then I am also just Cullen. I'm here. I'm the second person.
Yeah. Okay.
So really no Dutch ovening, douchebagging, or discrediting you want to do this morning? Any book recommendations? I know some people are fiending for them.
No.
Great.
I will say.
I'm reading Three Body Problem, and it's pretty good.
No. Are you kidding me? No one asked for your book recommendations.
Wow.
Okay, so today we're talking about the Dyatlov Pass incident, which is very popular amongst, unsolved mystery lovers. But I got a lot of the information from the Bedtime Stories book, which was made from the Bedtime Stories video, and I really enjoyed that video. It's very spooky, very respectful. It was a great source until right at the end.
Yeah.
It wasn't a buzzer beater with that unverified piece of information, but it's still entertaining.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to the New Yorker article on Dyatlov Pass. A quality read if you want to follow up a little bit more on this sort of stuff. But we're going to cover it all.
All right. I actually do, some last minute douchebaggery. So the main leader of this expedition is named Igor Dyatlov. Okay. Thoughts on the first name Igor for one of our children?
You keep on pitching like these weird Eastern European names.
No, I don't.
You want Victor and Igor?
I didn't say Victor.
Yeah, you pitch it. You say Victor.
I don't know.
Strong name.
You say Victor, as in a victorious.
Oh my God. I don't think that you can just predestine like that. Big Dick Jim is going to be the kid's name if we're fucking trying to vision board his future.
Big Dick Jim? Was he named after my grandpa? Oh shit, we do have some other discrediting of ourselves to do.
Oh, do we?
Yeah. Would you like to start your pre-written apology to my family?
I would like to apologize to the Schultz clan. Turns out that they actually fought against the Nazis. Some in there. So that was cool of them, I'll say.
Don't call us a clan, please. Anyways.
You did this.
Yeah, so when I asked my dad before the last episode where the Schultzes were during World War II, he neglected to mention until after we went on a whole little fun little roasting tiny session.
It was fun.
That his grandpa actually fought in World War II on the American side, so Nice. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, great Grandpa Schultz.
Appreciate that.
So just put some respect on their names. He did imply that my mom's side of the family might have been Nazis, so we'll kind of address that. And
I think that we'll probably address that over dinner next time we're over.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so anyways, with all that out of the way, today's story is of the famous Dyatlov Pass incident. In the winter of 1959, a group of Russian students set out on a harrowing trek through the Ural Mountains. The trip was meant to qualify them as master hikers and skiers, but they were never able to complete it. From the moment their bodies were found, it was clear that this was no ordinary hiking accident. A scene of horrible injuries, burned bodies, unexplained photographs, and radiation exposure have made finding the events of the Dyatlov Pass group's demise a web of misinformation and Cold War secrets. This is definitely, if you are into unsolved mysteries, kind of the creepy stuff that we get into, you are definitely familiar with this case. And yeah, like pretty quickly, you can see that some very strange things are going on. A lot of unexplained things were happening. You know, it wasn't just one or two strange injuries. It's like all strange injuries.
This is definitely a meat and potatoes unsolved mystery out there, you know?
But we're going to dive in. I actually think I could say we're definitely going to do a deep dive.
Yeah. And even as just calling outside of anything, this is one of the ones that starts to convince me a little bit more of some of the crazier options. But let's set everything up.
In 1959, Igor Dyatlov assembled a group of 9 students for a skiing expedition across the northern Ural Mountains. So quickly, for those of us who are as terrible at geography as I am, the Ural Mountains are like the dividing line between Europe and Asia.
Interesting. I also didn't know that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll also say that if I was in college, as most of the people on this trip were, and I was approached by a man called Igor Dyatlov to go on a hike, I would be certain to say no because there's no way I make it. I'm sure he's going to be fine. There's no way my chubby little dumpling of a body is going to be able to get over the mountains that he is planning to traverse.
Yeah, if anyone approached me for a hike, gotta say no, gotta pass on that.
Yeah, that's fair.
We have podcaster bodies.
But the hikes you're being approached on, like the people are usually kitted out in like cargo shorts and like Nike New Balances. I feel like Igor would show up in the student union with like one of those giant backpacks that goes above his head and a bunch of like, what are those hooks that they use to get into the ice? Like he just has them.
Right. This is wild. They are going to hike in the northern Ural Mountains, like in Russia.
In winter.
In the middle of winter.
They started in like January or February.
How? I was thinking about it while I was doing my pre-podcast piss, and I don't think I've ever been in a temperature lower than like 45 degrees.
You only have to go back like 5 or 6 episodes to hear Maddie screaming about how we never turned the heat on in our house in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah. So freaking cold. Shit got like 68.
It's like 68 inside.
Freezing. Yeah, so literally these type of temperatures I can't even comprehend.
Absolutely not.
But, Igor Dyatlov was a skilled, experienced hiker, and he wanted to get these group of students for his hike. And the northern Ural Mountains that they were going to cross were located in Sverdlovsk in the Soviet Union.
You are watching a podcast in which everyone views a woman run across a minefield back and forth until eventually one of the pronunciation landmines gets her.
I'm actually pretty confident because, I was telling you last night, I was like, it's just pronounced like how you read it.
And I think that's the mindset that you need to have going into this.
Yeah. Well, so this was in Soviet Union time. So Sverdlovsk is now called Yekaterinburg. Okay, that one wasn't good, but you know what?
Boom.
So this mountain trek was known as one of the most difficult advanced hikes in the region. This region of extremely difficult advanced hikes. So to the native people in the area, which would be the Mansi, the peaks were known as Kolat Saikal or Dead Mountain.
Fuck yeah!
I don't know. I don't hike at all, so hard to say, but if I was hiking in a place called Dead Mountain, I don't know about that.
I know we've referenced this story before, but Dead Mountain sounds like the name of a band I would bring my friends to and they'd leave in the first song.
They left. He's mad about it.
I'm still mad about it.
So interestingly, the current mayor of Moscow is reportedly Mansi, which is the indigenous people of the region. The Moscow News in 2011 praised him for, quote, the most sane piece of city planning in years, end quote.
You would think that the Moscow News would be more censored than to say something that's such a viciously backhanded compliment.
That's fair. It may not be a compliment. And what's definitely not a compliment is Sir Ian McClellan calling him a coward for making gay pride parades illegal in the city.
And I'm going to go ahead and be on Sir Ian McKellen's side.
I'm always on his side.
Except for the
cats,
cats, yeah.
Except for cats.
Can't hold it against him. He probably could have said no to licking out of that bowl.
Oh, Lord.
Probably could have said no to that.
The director of Cats has like some fucking Epstein level blackmail on all those actors.
Has to.
Except James Cordone. Like, he's just a fucking...
Yeah, he's a fucking attention seeking missile.
That's fun. So, the expedition crew consisted of course, leader Igor Dyatlov, who was 23, as well as 8 men, including Yuri Doroshenko, who was 21, Georgy, who was also known as Yuri, Kravonoschenko, who was 23, Alexander Kolevotov, who was 24, Rustim Slobodin, who was 23, Nikolai Thibault Brigonoles, who was 23, Semyon, who was also known as Alexander, Zolotaryov, who was 38, we'll get into that age difference in a little bit, Yuri Yudin, who was 21, and 2 women, Lyudomila Dubanina, who was 20, and Zinaida Kolmogorova, who was 22.
And if you're feeling like you just got read a list of specials at a restaurant that's more than 5 items long, that's how we all feel. Don't worry about the names too much. We'll re-reference them as they come up later on. So don't worry too much about following the names per se, guys.
Oh, yeah. So, like I said, it may be important to note that Semyon Zolotaryov was a newcomer to the group. And he was originally going to go with a different expedition group, and kind of at the last minute, he was placed in Dyatlov's group.
By the university.
Mm-hmm. So everyone is in their 20s, early 20s, and whereas Semyon or Alexander was 38. So Igor Dyatlov was a radio engineering student at the Urals Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, as were the other hikers recruited for the journey. So like we said before, these are all like students in this Polytechnic Institute. I mean, they're all like STEM.
Yeah, they're mostly seem like about to graduate or already graduate students. They're all 23 or 24, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so despite the crew being quite young, everyone on the crew was a skilled hiker and a certified grade 2 hiker with ski tour experience. After this expedition, the group would receive grade 3 certification, which was the highest certification available at the time. And to receive their grade 3 certification, hikers needed to hike at least 190 miles. So this is all to say that the members of this expedition were, of course, extremely experienced, especially considering their young age. That is a lot of dedication and a lot of miles to be hiking in Russia. I remember when we went to the San Diego Zoo, we walked like 5 miles and I was dead. I was dying. And I woke up in the middle of the night screaming with some Charlie horses. So don't know about that.
It's because we really don't have to walk at all in our lives anymore.
No, I don't even make my 800 step a day goal.
Will they lower below 800?
Yeah, I think it was 500 the other day.
Your goal now is 2.
And you know what? Most days I don't make
You
it.
don't quite make it. What about a 2020 version of that song where it's like, to the kitchen, to the bed?
Nice. Honestly, till the sweat drips off my balls.
And I don't take a shower.
Okay, well, come on. We don't have to. We're not coming out of this looking good.
Not smelling good. That's for at the least.
Let us know in the comments below if you could smell us through the...
Yeah.
So the crew set out on their expedition on January 23rd, 1959, the day they received their route book and approval from the Sverdlovsk City Committee of Physical. Oh no, I didn't have the last word. Physical action.
Physical love.
So they began their expedition by traveling by train from Sverdlovsk to the northern Soviet Union. So they began their hike, like their actual walking and skiing, around January 27th. So January 28th, Yuri Yudin actually left the group and returned to Sverdlovsk due to a variety of health issues that caused him really bad knee and joint pain.
He had sciatica, which I don't really know what that is, but I've seen a lot of daytime TV ads for it.
Yeah, I think it's like a nerve issue. Pretty wild he was able to get his grade 2 and hike a bunch anyways, but...
Yeah, and if he didn't have a flare-up, I mean, you'll see. Good that he did.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so he left on January 28th, and yeah, they bid him a warm goodbye. And
they didn't bid him a warm anything. They didn't have a warm anything.
True, a cold, freezing temps. Yeah, poor Yuri Yudin was very upset, didn't want to leave his friends, and unfortunately, that would be the last time he ever saw them.
I will say thanks again, Yuri. In hindsight, you made keeping all the names in order just a little bit easier, because we already have 2 Yuris to keep track of for the rest of this.
True.
3 would have been a little aggressive. And you know what I'm mad about? I think one of the Yuris had a regular name that wasn't Yuri, had a name George, but went by Yuri.
Well, I'll just be referring to them by their last names. And there are also 2 Alexanders, Alexander Kolevotov, but also Semyon Zolotaryov went by Alexander. So the expedition was slated to take around 3 weeks, and originally Igor planned to be back at base by February 12th. So February 12th comes and goes, and the days went by with no sign of the hiking group. Their families did begin to worry, though the group being delayed due to poor weather was not out of the realm of possibility and had happened before. In fact, before Yuri Yudin left, Igor told him that they would likely return later than initially planned. However, by the time February 20th came with no communication from the hikers, family members of the expedition began their search. So a search party was sent out, guided by native Mansi hunters. The search party consisted of friends and family of the hikers, as well as students and faculty from the university. Well, on February 26th, the search party discovered the hikers' abandoned tent on a gentle incline on the Kholat Saikal around 800 meters up the mountain.
Do you mean Dead Mountain?
Yeah, I get it's also called that.
Sick.
So many experts agree that this was not an ideal location to pitch a tent due to being kind of exposed and being on an incline. Though it was, like I said, on a gentle incline of about 30 degrees.
You know what also isn't an ideal place to pitch a tent?
Your freaking jorts.
I was going to say a school assembly, but kind of little column A, little column B on that one, eh?
Nice. So at first, searchers were only able to see just a small part of the tent's canvas, as most of it was covered in snow. After the snow was removed from the tent, it was discovered that the tent was collapsed and cut open from the inside. It is believed that the tent was slashed open from the inside using a knife.
Shout out randomly to the seamstress that helped the police figure that out. That's got to be a cool day for her.
Was it a seamstress?
I read that they brought the tent back to like the police station, then they had a seamstress look at it, and she was like, no, this was definitely cut open from the inside.
Yeah, I saw that they also did like forensic fiber analysis.
That's what they wrote down, but it was really just like Fiona Stanislav from down the road that told them, and they're like, oh, we came up with this. with our
Damn.
police measures.
Oh my gosh, I could believe that. So the tent contained a large amount of the hiker's supplies, including a blanket, rucksacks, boots, the route map, money, official papers, and alcohol. Additionally, there was a plate of prepared but uneaten food, which would be white pork fat, otherwise known as sallow.
I will say, I'm always dubious of when they say that there was like food out. A couple sources say that it was like all set out, like they were just ready to have a meal. I don't think that that's true. I heard other sources say that they had like partially eaten bits, and other things suggest that they were actually like all laid out kind of sleeping like sardines in their little tent. It seems like that detail comes up a lot, but this is the one case I'll say it's more believable that they actually did have food out.
Yeah, I saw that they had food like out on a plate and it wasn't eaten yet, but it was kind of like on a plate and cut up to kind of like about to be eaten. So on February 27th, the search party began again with renewed fervor. So they find this tent, they're feeling really good, like they're getting really close. The search party gained even more volunteers, including members of the Russian military. So outside the tent that had been discovered collapsed, the group found footprints believed to be created by around 8 or 9 people. The footsteps were leading down the slope towards the edge of a woods near the base of the mountain. The tracks were only visible for around 500 meters before being covered by snow. So I will say something important to note. All the sources say that for the first few hundred meters, the tracks are kind of all over the place, like people going in different directions, and they're more compressed in the snow, like they were moving faster. By the last few hundred meters, they are pretty much in a single file line, and the tracks aren't as deep, implying they were moving more slowly and more organized.
Definitely. And just to clarify, that tree line that the footprints were leading to is about 1.5 kilometers away from the tent. So a good distance, about a mile.
So the tracks seem to be made by people who were wearing a variety of scant footwear, including one set with only one boot, some sets with just socks, or completely barefoot even. So early in the morning of February 27th, the searchers followed the tracks and continued in the direction that they led. As stated earlier, the footsteps led down the hill towards the woods, which were around 1 mile and specifically 0.93 of a mile away from the tent. When the searchers reached the edge of the tree line, they found the remains of a small fire at the bottom of a large cedar tree. So this is important. This cedar tree will kind of be the new base of the search. So this large cedar tree had a small fire at the bottom of it, and additionally, this specific tree seemed to be damaged. Many branches were broken and removed in such a way that suggested someone may have climbed the tree or someone may have been using the branches for kindling.
And depending on which reports you follow that came out a couple decades after the original investigation took place, some of these trees might have also been burned slightly.
Tragically, underneath the tree, near the fire pit, the body of Yuri Doroshenko was discovered. It was determined that he died due to hypothermia. So during his short life, Doroshenko was considered to be extremely brave and brash and had even reportedly scared a bear away during a previous expedition.
The animal?
What?
Okay, probably.
Or do you mean a big burly gay man?
We don't have to spell it out for the audience. My clever little goofs can can stand on their own.
Yeah. So despite being large and strong, Doroshenko's body was not found in a great condition. Doroshenko was found in his underwear despite conditions of negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. His body had a large amount of small cuts and bruises, and his upper lip was swollen. His face was covered with dried blood as well as a gray, foamy substance that suggested a pulmonary edema. Additionally, part of his head and one foot seemed to be burned. A lot of sources might differ in kind of the specific body parts that were found burned, but from all the sources, it seems like Yuri Doroshenko definitely had burns on his body.
For sure.
Unfortunately, the body of Yuri Kravonoschenko was discovered lying next to Doroshenko, and it was determined that he too died due to hypothermia. Kravonoschenko was known to be a jokester and was a musician skilled at playing the mandolin. It is believed that Kravonoschenko and Doroshenko passed away at a similar time, and their bodies were found in a similar condition. Kravonoschenko's body was found undressed with, once again, bruises all around, as well as an injury to his abdomen. The tip of Kravonoschenko's nose was missing, and a piece of his knuckle was found in his mouth, suggesting that he bit it off. And similar to Doroshenko, it seemed that Kravonoschenko had burns, especially on his hands. Just a little before we get carried away, really, and I do mention this later, a lot of the bodies had kind of missing parts of their soft tissue, but what we really do see in decomposition, especially in people who pass away from exposure, if there's animals in the area, they will go for the soft tissue. So we're not, we're not saying this is super unusual, that it definitely could be caused, and the coroner agrees, by animal predation.
So next time you're taking a nap and your cat nibbles on the end of your nose, just think about that for a little bit.
Oh yeah, cats won't wait at all.
I saw his little stopwatch. He has a tiny, tiny little watch underneath his fur, and it's just set to 15 minutes from when he sees us stop moving.
Yeah, at least once a week he'll try to eat me.
When you were sleeping and he came up and he went, on your big toe.
True. He was in for a little bonbon. So later that day, February 27th, the body of group leader Igor Dyatlov was discovered 300 meters away from the cedar tree, traveling up the slope towards the tent. Igor was a successful engineering student and a well-respected leader. He was extremely intelligent, and he had built his own wireless devices as well as a camping stove that he had brought to the expedition.
1 for 4 ain't bad. I'm doing all right.
What do you mean?
I'm an engineering student.
You're not well-respected.
Yeah, I haven't built things. What else was on the list?
Extremely intelligent. I'm not going to touch that one.
Okay. What else we got?
You're smart.
Any other ones on there that I might be able to check off?
Successful.
Is there like a 1-letter bingo?
Well, like Kravonoschenko and Doroshenko, it was determined that Igor tragically died due to hypothermia. His body was slightly better dressed when compared to Doroshenko and Kravonoschenko. However, it still wasn't appropriate for the severe weather, and Igor was not wearing shoes. Igor was found covered with snow, and his hands were found tightly clenched into fists. He had injuries to his hand and bruises on his body, and he was missing a lower incisor. So some sources state that the coroner report explains that Igor's hand injuries were consistent with trauma from a fist fight, though, of course, most sources state that there is no clear evidence of any conflict. Zenaida Kolmogorova was found 630 meters away from the cedar tree. It appeared as though she had also been traveling uphill towards the tent. It was determined that Zenaida died from hypothermia. So, just to explain, the first 2 bodies found, Doroshenko and Kravonoschenko, were found under the cedar tree a mile away downhill from the tent. Igor and Zenaida were found away from the cedar tree, moving back towards the tent. So Zenaida Kolmogorova, also called Zaina, was extremely personable and warm and was described as lively by her friends. She definitely seems like the type who would be described as lighting up the room when she walked in. And I would say that as a woman, and you're more likely to get murdered, that's really the goal, is to be described on a true crime show as lighting up the room when you walk in.
Yeah. When you see a show where someone isn't described like that, it really makes you think, because almost everyone is.
That's true. Or if they're not described as giving the shirt off people's back.
Yeah.
You can tell when they don't say that, when they're like, did they have any enemies? Their family members like, one or two.
You could, I don't know.
That's definitely me. If I get murdered, I do have enemies. So,
I mean, you've made any number of death threats in your life.
Jokes.
Mostly jokes.
Jokes. We got jokes.
Yeah.
So Zina was dressed similarly to Igor, that being in clothes, but not sufficient enough for the weather. And her body was in a similar condition with a variety of small bruises and cuts. The coroner determined that she had not been sexually active. And this was checked just to see if she was partnering with anyone else on the expedition that might cause some conflict. Tragically, Zina's body was found with a large bruise on the right side of her torso. This bruise was a foot long and bright red and reportedly looked fresh, as though it had been made recently or shortly before her death. The bruise was described as appearing as though it could have been made by a baton, the butt of a rifle, or another blunt object. So searchers did not find any of the other 5 hikers until March 5th, 1959. And it was then when the body of Rustem Slobodin was discovered. Like the 4 hikers found before him, Rustem was said to have died from hypothermia. Rustem was a mechanical engineer, and he was usually considered the shyest of the group. He was also a musician and could always be found carrying his mandolin with him.
You know what? 3 for 3. Well, a mandolin, not quite, but I'm looking into it.
Yeah, that's... What? Wait.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But if you're in the other room, like...
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that one is very similar to you.
Mm-hmm.
Rustem was discovered 480 meters away from the cedar tree, so he would be located somewhere in between Igor and Zina in his trek back uphill towards the tent.
And maybe this is inappropriate, but the Olympics are still getting a lot of coverage right now, so congrats to Zina. She got the gold. She got the furthest up the hill.
Wow, that's terrible.
Well, I'm just congratulating her. When you get further up the hill than the expedition leader, that's got to be a little like apprentice becomes the master.
I certainly wish she had made it to the tent.
Yeah, that would have been ideal, but like, what are we going to take her accomplishments away just because she didn't do the entire mile?
Yeah, so this confused me a little bit. So, I just want to triple check to explain again. Doroshenko and Kravonoschenko, the 2 Yuris, were found the cedar tree a mile downhill. So then it was found 3 of the hikers going uphill back towards the tent. That would be Igor, and then further towards the tent, Rustem, and then further up towards the tent, Zina. So Rustem was the best dressed of the hikers that had been found so far. He was wearing a long sleeve undershirt, a sweater, 2 pairs of pants, 4 pairs of socks, and 1 boot. So Doroshenko and Kravonoschenko were found in their underwear, and so far Igor, Zina, and Rustem had clothes on, but it's not enough clothes for negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit.
Definitely.
So like the other hikers, Rustem's body had minor cuts and bruises. Unlike the others, however, Rustem was found with a fractured skull, though of course the coroner did not report his skull fracture as a cause of death, but rather hypothermia. Interestingly, I haven't seen too much about this, but it is believed that all of the bodies, with the exception of Igor, possibly were moved post-mortem.
Yeah, there's a lot of, one source says in this, just because A, not everything is translated over, which is difficult, and B, so many people have written and done investigations on this in the 60 years it's been relevant. So there's a lot of like, one source says they were moved, one source says this, one source says that. We're just kind of trying to do what we always do and synthesize that down into some possibilities.
Yeah, a lot of sources mention that the bodies, with the exception of Igor, seem to be moved, but they don't really go into detail about that, what that could mean, where they were moved from.
Maybe animals, maybe they just slid down the mountain. So we have these 5 bodies, and then it kind of goes quiet for a while. The investigation isn't able to find anyone else for a few months, and they basically call the effort off. But later on, a Mansi hunter stumbles across another set of bodies.
Yeah, exactly. So the other 4 hikers weren't discovered until months later, and that would be in May 1959. This was due to the snow beginning to melt. That you see that a lot in, a lot of cases of missing people, of crimes. A lot of evidence is unearthed once snow begins to melt. So Kurakov, who was a Mansi native, discovered a trail made from cut branches that led 75 meters deeper into the woods from the cedar tree. Following this trail led to the discovery of a 6-meter deep ravine. On May 5th, 1959, searchers dug the snow out of the ravine, and this was a huge effort, where they discovered the 4 remaining hikers buried under 13 feet of snow. The 4 hikers appeared better dressed than all of the other hikers found before, implying that they were likely using the other hikers' clothes. There were 2 man-made dens found near the ravine. All of this kind of implies that these 4 hikers that were found in May have survived longer than the other hikers, may have been in this ravine, in these dens for a longer haul. One of the hikers found in the ravine was Alexander Kolevotov, who was the only hiker in the ravine that passed away due to hypothermia. So Kolevotov was studying nuclear physics, and he was said to be a fairly private person. So we don't know much about him. I heard, though, that he did love smoking a pipe.
Hell yeah, bro. I have noticed that also most of the kids in my nuclear physics class were private people, but that was more because no one talked to them. And I don't know how you classify that exactly.
Wow.
Hey, I was in the class too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I almost failed it, and that makes me cool.
That does make you cool. That's true. It's
getting
cool.
an A in a hard class. You're a nerd. Almost failing a hard class. That makes you sick, actually.
It's we're here to say that it's cool to be bad at school.
Oh, yeah.
And we say that as 2 people who were good at school and graduated with like bachelor degrees. So despite Alexander Kolevotov, who we will refer to as Kolevotov due to another Alexander in the group, despite his cause of death being listed as hypothermia, his body did have many major injuries. His nose was found broken and his eyes were missing. He had a large open wound behind his ear, and his neck was twisted in an odd, deformed way. Additionally, Kolevotov's clothing was found to be slightly radioactive.
Here we're starting to see all the really strange details that really signify Dyatlov Pass as the mystery that it's grown into. We've seen a bunch of hypothermic deaths, some smaller injuries, but these 4 bodies, as you're beginning to see, are really bizarre.
We're getting into right now. The final 3 hikers found died from much more gruesome injuries.
Hypothermia is pretty gruesome, but it's not going to get you into like a slasher flick.
Yeah, we mean more like physical trauma to the body, like very obvious injuries.
Yeah, if you're fighting anyone except for Sub-Zero.
So getting right into it, Semyon Alexander Zolotaryov was found embraced with Kolevotov. Zolotaryov was, like we said, the outsider of the group. who had joined the expedition shortly before it began. Despite this, as well as the fact that he was much older than the rest of the group, he seemed to get along quite well with the hikers and was described as very personable. He was also extremely experienced, and like we said earlier, he was already a certified grade 3 hiker. He also had experience in the military during World War II, which we'll get into more in depth in the theory section.
We'll be digging into that, but you can kind of think of him, even though he wasn't really the leader of the group, that was Igor Dyatlov. He might have been along because he was already at the grade they were all seeking to attain. So he might have been there for a little bit of advice or to be, you know, the highest ranking member in that certification and kind of help out in bringing them to that point.
Right. So Zolotaryov's cause of death was determined to be a, quote, crushing injury, end quote, to his chest. The entire top half of Zolotaryov's right rib cage was fractured. He had an open wound on the right side of his head that was extremely deep, so deep that it exposed bone. And like Kolevotov, he was missing his eyes and eyelids. According to some sources, he was found with a pen and paper in his hand, though he hadn't been found to have written anything on that paper. Zolotaryov was found wearing footwear, so really he was one of the only hikers found to be in footwear. So Nikolai Thibault-Brignol was found 2 meters away from Kolevotov and Zolotaryov. Nikolai had a degree in industrial civil construction, and he was said to be extremely funny, despite being extremely educated and having the ability to be very serious at times. Nikolai's cause of death was listed as a fatal skull injury caused by a massive impact to the skull. His skull appeared to have multiple fractures on the temporal bone, so that is located on the side of the skull. The head injury was, of course, fatal and listed as his cause of death, as it was so severe. However, I've seen some sources state that if he did survive, the skull injury was so severe that it would have likely rendered Nikolai paralyzed.
Interesting.
Finally, Lyudomila Dubinina was the last hiker to be found in this ravine, and tragically, her body was in the worst condition. Lyudomila was the youngest of the group, and she was an ardent, outspoken communist. She was very intelligent and very serious, though she enjoyed the company of the group, and they enjoyed her company as well. We'll see, a camera was found that has a lot of pictures of the expedition, as well as some diaries, and what you can really see is Lyudmila kind of beginning to really let loose and enjoy the expedition.
She was serious and kind of quiet and didn't really have fun with anything, but throughout it seemed like the friendship or the camaraderie between the group kind of opened her up a bit.
Right. And, you know, just a little side note, the friendship, the camaraderie is something that Igor Dyatlov really harnessed and tried to cultivate. They did fun group activities when they weren't hiking, like writing their own little newspaper, like satire joking newspaper about their experience.
And that's a big accomplishment to like have her open up, because in my experience, all the communists I've ever talked to have been actually pretty mean to me.
Are you trying to address me?
You're no communist. You're a TJ Maxinista.
I'm a Maxinista first, before anything else.
She's been radicalized by the Maxinista movement.
Such good prices.
They're not
yes,
that
it
good.
is. Oh my God.
Now we can't do this 2
You're
episodes
getting me
in a
mad.
row. We cannot.
So, tragically, Lyudmila's death was said to be caused by internal bleeding due to severe chest trauma. All but 8 of her ribs had been crushed, and Lyudmila's body was found missing her eyes, and the soft tissue around her eyes and around her mouth was also missing, as well as her tongue.
And this is one of the big details that comes up all the time with Dyatlov Pass, is the missing eyes of the other hikers, as well as hers, and the fact that Some sources say her tongue was cut out, though it doesn't seem like there's a lot of evidence for cutting.
This is one of the details that often gets very sensationalized. And so I didn't want to put too much emphasis, but I also put it separately to just, make it clear she was missing her tongue. But as we'll get into, the coroner didn't determine whether it was bitten off, cut off. It just wasn't there.
Just said missing. For all of the soft tissue damage, the coroner suggested decomposition, and other people have suggested scavenging, but we'll get into all of that in the theories.
It is important to note, like we said earlier, animals tend to damage and ingest soft tissues.
They love it.
So
They really do. It's like when I give the cat a little bit of salami as a treat. I can just imagine him chewing on a tongue.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That's terrible.
It's frightening. Every once in a while, don't you ever have that where you look at your pets and you're like, I wonder if their playing is trying to kill. And it is.
It is.
It is.
It is,
It
yeah.
is.
They're practicing.
Yeah.
Our cat has lately been loving attacking our dogs' legs and gnawing on them.
Yeah. And our dog has really long, spindly legs. So it's actually a really good strategy.
Yeah.
Also, I remember once when I was with my roommate and the cat was around, he was like, oh, he hasn't really been playing with his toy that much. And he picked up this little mouse that he had. And when he picked it up, we were both able to see that the cat had ripped out both of the mouse's eyes.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that is terrible. And you'll see, too, in a lot of cases of people found in water, first of all, increases decomposition. But second of all, I've seen turtles ingest body parts.
And I respect that you're using this platform of ours to @ all turtle girls.
True. You think don't save the turtles. Bold take.
Turtle girl, the new horse girl?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta be.
Wild. If you haven't noticed, turtle girls are also on something else.
Yeah, watch out for them. But turtles are cute. Turtles are nice.
They're nice. They're cool.
They're nice. They're cool. They're better than horses.
So back to the absolute tragic details.
Don't transition us like that, please.
How?
We're a comedy podcast.
Sit back down. Shut up.
Put
wherever
back
you are.
on your filthy your morning bib and eat up all this tragedy.
Oh my gosh. No, just respectfully listen.
Wow.
Are you guys respectful? I'll give you a moment. Okay.
Christ.
So back to how Lyudmila was found, the coroner reported that a significant amount of blood was found in her stomach. And other sources say that the coroner report actually listed her stomach as filled with, quote, a red slimy fluid, which could be a mix of blood and partially digested food and, just regular stomach acid. The coroner noted that the hikers who passed away due to physical trauma, which would be Lyudmila, Nikolai, and Zolotayev, did not obtain the trauma through any kind of human attack, any kind of specifically, I think they said melee attack. But in fact, their injuries had to have been caused by an extreme amount of pressure, similar to trauma caused by a car accident, an explosion, or another type of high-speed impact. The official investigation into the event concluded that the deaths were caused by, quote, a compelling natural force, end quote.
Which is a little odd, in my opinion. A compelling natural force seems like a little bit of a, it was natural, don't worry about it answer.
Yeah, definitely. That is a big fact that many people will go back to. Be like, a compelling natural force. Also that explains next to nothing.
That explains all of the deaths that the cold box of Russia deals out.
Damn.
It's a harsh country to live in.
Bears.
Yeah.
Snow.
Yeah. This
Communists. That is really all the details of the case. Of course, extremely tragic, and nothing seems to be adding up quickly. So we will go into some of the theories, and like we will mention before and we'll mention again, very popular case, very sensationalized. So with these type of cases, with anything, once you get on the internet, a lot of fringe theories, a lot of conspiracy theories abound.
And it's called having fun with it.
I guess, yeah.
But just to really quickly go over everything, just so you understand what we're dealing with, we have a hiking accident where the group died, but they're not just lost off of the trail and out of food. They're not huddled together in the cold all at once. We have them cutting their way out of their only shelter. We have them displaced across the hill. Some of them have fallen down into a ravine. The majority of them have unexplained injuries, whether they're burns or crushings or skull fractures. And some of them are even displaying signs of radiation.
Right. And of course, I think that is a huge factor that, factors into the uniqueness of this case is really every hiker found, it seems to be a mystery. It's not consistent at all. Like you said, it's not like they were all huddled in a makeshift shelter and passed away from hypothermia. Obviously, a lot of strange things had to have occurred.
Definitely.
So that being said, let's get into the theories. So we'll begin with some honorable mentions.
Or dishonorable mentions.
Yeah, like we said, there is every theory you could think of that has been presented about this case.
So we're just going to cover some of them.
So one long debunked theory from the time put the blame on the native Mansi people.
You guessed it.
This is what we call racism.
Ooh.
So the nicer version suggests that the hikers may have taken and eaten hallucinogenic mushrooms, which the Mansi were known to hang in trees to dry.
If you didn't think the Mansi were already cool for using dead mountain to go hunting on, hanging a bunch of psychedelic mushrooms to dry on trees, pretty cool. I'm down with them.
That's pretty fun. However, the Mansi wouldn't have used a barren, far-off, isolated area to dry food, and the toxicology reports and autopsies probably would have detected mushrooms, and they seem to be completely clean.
Yeah, it seems like they did run toxicology reports, and maybe some of the people had been drinking alcohol, but that's about it. They didn't seem to have picked up anything of serious interest.
Yeah, and I would say that it's pretty confirmed in a lot of sources that the toxicology reports report that the hikers were not intoxicated at all.
They might have had a little drink, because especially back in the 50s and 60s, using whiskey or any sort of liquor for cold was believed to help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, have you ever heard of those dogs that were sent out?
Wait, are they the St. Bernards with barrels of alcohol?
Yeah. St. Bernards with little collars with a barrel of whiskey on there.
That's great.
And they'd go find people. And you know what? Alcohol makes you flush, so it warms you up, but technically it brings all the blood to the surface and you freeze faster.
I get very warm from one glass of wine.
Oh, yeah.
I went to a happy hour with my parents the other day, and they had to drive me home and then drive back to the happy hour because I got hot and ate too many mozzarella sticks.
Very good.
So the less nice 1959 theory says that the Mansi murdered or even sacrificed the group because they wandered onto sacred land.
This is a mainstay of basically any disappearance.
Yeah.
I honestly think that it probably has to be rooted in some sort of deep held guilt where it's
yeah.
And this shows up with Roanoke too and a bunch of other disappearances. I think it's psychologically if they had taken out a whole hiking group or they had taken out Roanoke, that would have been fair play.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I definitely agree. It's rooted in deeply held racist beliefs. It's definitely rooted in colonizer guilt as well. Ugh, so annoying. Yeah, literally, it's... What?
Matt Spooky Maddie's take on colonizer guilt is so annoying. Colonizers out here colonizing. That's annoying as fuck.
Annoying to me.
Columbus was being really fucking extra.
Obnoxious much? It harkens back to the whole they're savages, manifest destiny, fucking choke.
And it makes even less sense in this scenario because the Mansi were cool as fuck. They helped at every turn. They helped the original investigators when they came out to look for the bodies. When the Mansi hunter found the second set of bodies, he reported it pretty much immediately.
Yeah, I was looking into the Mansi people, and there's a group of indigenous people who live very close by named the Conti. And I was looking into them, and I asked Cullen, because, of course they weren't left alone. Stupid bullshit happened to them from the Russian people. And
Wait, they weren't just like living on their land and then they continued to do that?
No.
Oh.
No, they were like moved to collective farms and fucking, I asked you, I was like, why can't people just fucking leave indigenous people alone? And you're right, it's because they want to take their land.
Gotta have their land. Gotta have it.
So for this theory, just disgusting. Imagine how a trashy horror movie would handle this incident. And it's basically what people thought.
More or less.
Colonizer guilt. According to a few places, there was a Mansi sacrifice totem nearby, but it was probably for a moose since it had moose antlers at the top.
It had moose antlers at the top. And there's no evidence whatsoever that the Mansi ever did human sacrifice, and almost no indigenous tribes anywhere have done human sacrifice.
Yeah, why? That's also such a mainstay of the white Christian right to land of being savages doing human sacrifices. And what's wild is white Christian societies also kill people, hanging people in the middle of the square.
Oh, but it's organized.
It's
organized, so it's cool.
So even back in 1959, a lot of people pushed against this theory and it was ruled out. So like Cohen said, the Mansi helped investigators at every turn, acting as guides. And of course, it was Mansi person Kurakov that helped find the last 4 hikers. Furthermore, when they asked the Mansi if the land was sacred, to quote the New Yorker, quote, they told the investigators that the area was not sacred. On the contrary, it was considered windy, barren, and worthless, end quote.
So, did you, by chance, murder and sacrifice the entire group of hikers because they wanted onto your sacred land? Oh, that land? The Dead Mountain? The shitty, super cold, frigid bullshit place? No, fuck that place. Fuck that shit mountain.
Yeah, so like we said, this theory of Mansi natives playing a part, there was pushback at the time and was pushed back by the coroner, and maybe the reason that the coroner specifically said that the hikers who died due to trauma, that trauma could not have been caused by people, by humans.
By a human.
By humans,
By
yeah.
humans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are we alluding to?
So here is another classic theory for you. Maybe the group panicked at a terrifying sight of ball lightning.
Ball lightning.
Ball lightning.
I have a confession to make.
Mm-hmm. You love it.
I've started to fall into the magic, into the guise of ball lightning.
Yeah, we were on the way to somewhere, probably Duncan, and you were like, well, actually, ball lightning, it's a phenomenon. It's a hurry.
I've been one of the biggest shit honors of ball lightning, and I'll stick with the fact that it is used way too much and applied to everything. Mm-hmm. But a quick scroll through the Wikipedia page, we might have to cover it at some point.
Yeah.
Ball lightning is pretty cool. Basically, it's a phenomenon where you have a ball of light electric energy that can be up to a couple feet in diameter. Mm-hmm. And it's just the cool part is it just shows up in places.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not I thought ball lightning was up in the sky and they were like, whoa, that's a ball of fucking lightning. No.
Yeah.
No, it fucking comes to the ground and says, hey. It comes to the ground and runs around, or it can phase into planes. People have seen it inside
airplanes. Yeah.
What the fuck?
The reports of ball lightning appearing in airplanes is wild, though, and terrifying. And I did see it on Ancient Aliens, actually.
Yeah.
Which I've been watching.
Not good.
Oh, my
We can't
God.
recommend it.
The opposite of recommend it.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It's racist.
Yeah.
Oh, it's racism. Just because brown people did it doesn't mean that it was aliens. Just because white people couldn't do it doesn't mean that literal fucking aliens. And also, it's so weird that they're like, God? No, stupid. God doesn't exist. An alien?
All right, to reel us back into one level of not having to do with the story. While ball lightning is kind of cool, I think, now, probably not. It freaks people out a little bit, but they wouldn't have like sprinted off and like run away from it and stuff. And it doesn't burn people, so it doesn't explain the burns. There's been no signs of like damage to people from ball lightning. Sometimes it blows up, but it doesn't really hurt people, and it just kind of stinks. So we don't think it's ball lightning. And even more so, ball lightning is to Unsolved Mysteries what fucking lupus is to House MD.
True.
Always brought up, never a good explanation. But there's a dweeb out there who wants it to happen.
Right. This ball lightning theory came up because there could have possibly been spheres of light found in that night. But like Cullen said, ball lightning is just, it's not dangerous, it's not hot, doesn't really explain much at all. So here is a slightly more believable theory that comes in a few flavors, and that is brought up a lot in a lot of the little YouTube documentaries on the Dyatlov Pass incident. So it could be that the stove that the group brought along, which may have been homemade by Igor himself, accidentally smoked out the group or caused a fire.
And not in a fun kind of way with the smoking out.
True. It could have accidentally exhausted carbon monoxide into the tent, which is known to cause memory loss and delirium, causing the group to panic. Alternatively, as seen in the Lamino YouTube video on the mystery, he believed that it could have malfunctioned and pumped smoke into the tent. So while possible, the line of events afterwards still doesn't add up. Why would the group run 1 mile away to the tree line to escape smoke?
Unless they had like a shitload of fireworks inside. I don't think that they needed to like flee the tent by that much.
That's true. And if it was carbon monoxide and packed tent, it's likely they wouldn't have even woke up.
And if there was a fire or smoke or something that was destroying the tent, their first thing would probably be to get all of their supplies out, which they didn't.
Right. I mean, I guess I can see, we'll get more into detail of a string of events that could have occurred. Maybe they thought the fire would cause like a snow sliding down the mountain.
As she comes. Yeah, I don't know. The initial event kind of makes sense for them cutting their way out of the tent. But as for the fleeing by so much, I don't really see it.
Definitely not. And it definitely makes sense that they would try to either extinguish the fire or the smoke and try to get their supplies back.
Yeah, at least recover their supplies.
So finally, one you might not expect to be an honorable mention would be Avalanche. Despite the name Dead Mountain, the area isn't commonly known to have avalanches, and there wasn't really any evidence that an avalanche had occurred.
Interestingly, this is a theory that kind of got shut down by people who have traversed the mountains and guides and the native Mansi. All of those people really have never seen it occur on that mountain slope. That has created some pushback for theories that we'll cover in a moment.
Right, and just a quick kind of for the avalanche theory, it would explain why the group may have ran to a tree cover to a forest at the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah, because at the bottom of the slope where it starts to even out, the slide of all of the snow would have slowed down and lost some of its momentum. And also the trees will break the momentum of an avalanche somewhat too.
Right. So now that we've covered a few runners-up theories in brief, let's talk about some very popular theories that don't quite offer a full explanation, but could definitely be contributing factors. First, considering the brutally cold environment, hyperthermic hysteria seems to be an obvious culprit for the group's odd behavior. All right, Cullen just informed me that it's hysteria, but we are moving forward.
More like hysteria. Fucking. It's literally womb madness, I think, from the Greek.
It's men that cause all the problems in the world.
Wow.
So give
Yeah, but women haven't really been given a chance to cause problems, so we don't know if they do better.
them a chance.
Give women a chance to fuck shit up.
Yeah. I'm just thinking a fantasy world where we're all lesbians. Let's be honest. I like women and they're so pretty.
Great. I think they're pretty too.
Excuse you? Excuse you. What do you mean you think they're pretty? That you think they're pretty? You think women are pretty? Wow. Really?
Loving life in my queer relationship.
So, speaking on hypothermic hysteria, I like that it has beginning rhymes. If you have looked into cases where, people pass away from hypothermia, you will know that humans do really bizarre things in the later stages of hypothermia. The main behavior that is constantly brought up and honestly could explain some of the events in the Dyatlov Pass incident is termed paradoxical undressing. So this is a counterintuitive phenomenon where severely hypothermic individuals will take off their clothes and leave their tents, even press themselves into the snow.
So, for a quick explanation, and biology spooky Maddie, feel free to correct me if this is incorrect. When your body gets cold, super cold, it starts to worry more about like the core functions, like your heart beating and getting blood to your brain and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it uses a bunch of muscles to close off the blood vessels that go to the less important things, like your toes and your nose and your ears and stuff. Extremities of all sorts. But as you get further on and you get exhausted and in the later stages of hypothermia, basically those muscles get exhausted and like relax because they can't constrict anymore. And all of that warm blood that's been kept inside of your core flushes out to the outside, back into the extremities, and causes a feeling of being overheated with all of the blood suddenly flowing in. And it could even be painful with your extremities that are getting frostbitten suddenly getting warmed up very rapidly. Mm-hmm. So when you have that huge influx of warm blood out back to your extremities, you feel really hot. It starts to be painful to warm back up. And that's when people, like we might be seeing here, strip off all of their protective clothing and try to cool themselves down rapidly because they feel like they're burning up.
So paradoxical undressing is thought to possibly explain the fact that two members, Doroschenko and Kravonoschenko, were found in only their underwear under the cedar tree. However, Doroschenko and Kravonoschenko were found near the remnants of a fire, so that seems to be very abnormal. They also had made it as far as the tree line and had stuck together. Additionally, the rest of the group was clothed and even wore the clothes of the naked members. So, yeah, I think I agree that the undressing of Doroschenko and Kravonoschenko may be better explained by using their clothes for living members if they had already passed.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of the signs of the delirium that usually precedes paradoxical undressing and hypothermic deaths. It seems like they were somewhat organized or they were kept organized by the other members of the group.
Right. So despite being the cause of death of 6 of the 9 hikers, hypothermia is far from a complete explanation. However, the cold would have certainly affected the group's strength and judgment in the other scenarios we're covering. Like we said, 6 of the 9 hikers died from hypothermia, and none of them really were prepared for the cold, seemed to be well equipped for the low temperatures.
But as for fleeing from the tent and their injuries and how they were spread out, hypothermia doesn't really offer a good explanation for all of those details.
Of course. I mean, the question is, why weren't they well prepared? They're very experienced, skilled hikers. What is the reason that they came out with, not enough clothing?
Right.
So another consideration that may have contributed to the events could have been infighting among the group. Considering the harsh weather and arduous journey, tensions may have risen between the hikers. So some believe the injuries apparent on the hikers, including broken ribs, burns, and skull fractures, may have been inflicted by other group members. This could also explain why the group fractured, with half traveling between the tent and the tree line and the other half making a new snow shelter deeper in the tree line, deeper in the woods. woods. However, the hikers' logs, even personal diaries, didn't reflect any serious issues within the group. They were all good friends following a well-respected leader in Igor. Additionally, medical examinations suggested that the blunt trauma some of the hikers exhibited was caused by forces stronger than a human could inflict. This damage, like we said, was compared to a high-speed, high-impact injury of like a car accident.
Certainly the crushing of the ribs and the crushing skull fractures, they said, were beyond what would have happened if they were just fighting.
Right. And so lastly, it could be that the hikers were experiencing negative effects from a phenomenon called infrasound. And this is a very popular, well-cited theory in this case, and it's very interesting. So infrasound is essentially sound waves lower in frequency than 20 hertz, which is generally the lower threshold of human hearing. These very low frequencies aren't audible, but the pressure still vibrates in your eardrums and eyeballs. In fact, the eyes have a resonant frequency of around 18 hertz. Studies have suggested that infrasound can cause feelings of fear and anxiety in some people. It can even result in shortness of breath or seeing things in your peripheral vision. So for a lot of these reasons, infrasound is a skeptic go-to to explain hauntings. And you will see a lot of theories or possibilities where infrasound can be applied to a lot of unsolved mysteries. And I'm actually wondering, is this also, there are phenomenons of towns who hear like hums? Like there's like the hum and it kind of makes people just get anxious and kind of lose their right mind.
I think a lot of those have been described by a certain colony of fish.
Fish, yeah, I have seen that.
And I think it might be a mating thing. So it's literally just like, imagine if an entire town was driven crazy because a bunch of fish in their nearby lake were like, oh.
That sucks for people. This is a little more intense. This is more than hearing a hum of fish fucking, because you can't really hear it, this infrasound.
Right. The big story behind infrasound is from a professor who was working late nights in a lab that was supposedly like well known for being haunted. Mm-hmm. And he started to experience like really bizarre things. Like he was getting an anxious feeling when he was in there, especially alone. And he was viewing like these weird gray blobs in his peripheral vision. And when he looked over, it wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And even one night when he was working on something that he had placed in a vise in the center of the room, the foil that he was working on started to vibrate violently on its own. Mm. But the legend has it that he found out that the vent fan was producing something around 18 hertz. And he found that infrasound, that lower than the human threshold for hearing sound waves, was vibrating his eyes, which are causing the visual issues. Other studies have shown that it causes anxiety, perhaps because it sort of pulls air in and out of your lungs when you're trying to breathe, which can cause anxiety. And the foil shaking violently was because it was also at the resonant frequency of that 18.98 hertz, and it was in the center of the room where there was a standing wave that would have vibrated it back and forth. So basically that's expanded into saying that any number of these haunting locations that everyone experiences, or like a large number of people experience things at, are just sites where infrasound is caused by something, whether that's, in this case of Dyatlov Pass, maybe wind buffering in a very specific way that causes that infrasound, or, you know, any number of other explanations.
So would it be fair to say that in this case, this infrasound would have caused like psychological effects, which would have led to irrational steps taken, which would have led to death? It wouldn't have like caused brain bleeding. It just would have caused psychological effects that would influence their rational decision making.
That's right. I haven't seen anything in looking into infrasound that has ever said that it's able to actually cause damage to people, even their ears, unless it's extremely powerful, and then it's just going to blow your eardrums out. Mm-hmm. But it seems like, according to some of the studies, about 20 to 25% of people get that feeling of unexplained fear or anxiety when exposed to certain infrasounds.
Yeah, so all that being said, like Colin mentioned, it could have been that the winds in Dyatlov Pass buffered in such a way that they produced the low frequency sound. They produced infrasound, which of course panicked the hikers, caused some psychological effects that may have contributed to the night's tragic events. It could also be not that. So you might be wondering, what could Cullen's no fun, nerd, lame, loser, boring theory be this time?
My moment to shine.
So 60 years after the case being closed in 2019, the Dyatlov Pass case was reopened and theories have been rolling in since. The results have been enlightening but controversial. So here's the condensed version.
There is a possibility that I have to talk about right at the top, that this could just be a offhand explanation for a couple of Swedish guys who really like to watch the Disney movie Frozen a lot, and they needed to come up with some sort of explanation for that.
You'll also see that in the articles. We'll get into the Disney connection.
Can you spot in this video where Frozen solved a Russian deadly mystery? And it's a big red circle, and then you got the fucking arrow.
True.
And it's like Elsa looking at the corpses of all these men on the mountain.
Tasteless, and you're giving lesbians a bad name, Elsa.
She never minded the cold anyway.
Yikes. So getting into it, since the hiking team was headed up towards the summit of the mountain, when night began to fall, they dug a hollow into the slope to set their tent level. The section of the mountain they chose was downwind from the peak, so their tent would have been somewhat out of the wind. Like we said, a lot of experts do question why their tent was pitched, like on a slope.
Yeah, they could have gone back a little bit and then pitched their tent nearer to level ground and nearer to the tree line. But like we've said, the area wasn't known for avalanches, and they probably didn't want to lose the progress that they had made, considering that they were already delayed a few times with weather. So they did what they were supposed to do. You're supposed to cut into the slope to make a level piece. So you kind of have a wall of snow on one side where it goes up the mountain, and then you have the slope going down from your tent on the other side.
Yeah, a lot of experts agree that, of course, Igor Dyatlov and Alexander Zolotaryov were extremely experienced, and they wouldn't have haphazardly really chosen where to pitch tent.
Definitely not. They thought they could do it, and they were doing it correctly.
However, through the night, due to heavy winds and possibly a rare phenomenon called Catabatic Wind, in which heavy cold air falls rapidly down a slope, the wall of snow beside the group's tent could have built up higher and higher. Eventually, it's thought that the structure of the tent gave out, and hundreds of pounds of snow could have collapsed onto the group's tent. After the snow wall collapsed on them, the group, of course, cut their way out of the tent. From there, an obvious fear would have been that an avalanche was starting and on its way. In the face of a potential avalanche, which, a deadly phenomenon that all hikers in winter fear, the group reacted as they should have. They fled down the slope to the tree line where they would have had more protection. At the trees, the group built a fire from branches on that area and on the cedar tree. Broken branches and pieces of skin imply that one member may have climbed up the cedar tree they were under to find dry branches to burn. After some time, or once the two least clothed members unfortunately succumbed to hypothermia, the group decided that they had to act. The three members tried to head back toward the camp. They were found, of course, between 300 and 600 meters back up the slope from the cedar tree, dead from exhaustion and exposure. So it is also thought that the skin on the tree and the broken branches could have been once Doroschenko and Kravonoschenko passed away. Maybe they climbed up the tree to get a view of their tent to see if all was good so they could make their way back.
Very possible. And I also saw in some reports that they actually left a flashlight on on top of the tent to try to aid them in returning.
Interesting. The remaining 4 hikers who possibly received their injuries from the snowfall, they likely realized that they wouldn't be able to return to the tent, and they took the textbook approach. They found an area of thick snow a couple hundred feet from the cedar tree and built a snow cave. This probably would have kept them warm enough to survive the night. But what they did not know is they had built it on top of a creek that did not freeze in the winter. At some point, the snow cave collapsed with all 4 remaining hikers inside, dropping them onto the rocky stream and burying them under around 15 feet of snow. In this theory, the hikers' missing eyes and tongue were from decomposition in the flowing water as well as scavenging animals. The radiation on their clothes was likely due to 2 of the members who worked and lived near the Mayak nuclear disaster, as well as members who worked in the field of nuclear physics and nuclear manufacturing. So that is the leading theory today, but how good is it? There are some questions, to say the least. So the Kholat Syakhl is not known for avalanches whatsoever, like we said. And many who know this case and the mountain really don't believe this theory. On the other hand, of course, what this theory is claiming isn't a full typical avalanche, but rather a slab collapse, due partly to the party making their tent in the incline.
Again, this is something that, like, they didn't screw up here. It's just bad weather, bad conditions. And yeah, it's thought that that snow slowly built up from the perfectly fine point that they had dug in. It built up over the night and then eventually fell over basically on their tent.
Right. And evidence of a snow slab collapsing may have disappeared by the time investigators arrived. So it would have left less evidence than a full avalanche.
Yeah, we're not talking about an entire slope falling down. We're talking about like just below 1,000 pounds of snow falling over.
Right. So from our perspective, the timeline of the injuries is murky. Some researchers suggest that the slab collapse could have caused the chest and head trauma that we found on the 4 hikers. It seems unlikely, though, that such badly injured hikers could have hiked a mile in the snow.
This research is from the 2 Swedish guys who were trying to justify why they liked the movie Frozen so much. They were the ones that took the technology that they had developed for some of the animation of that movie and then applied it to this situation to talk about how the slab built up and then how it might have collapsed and kind of crushed a few of the members in the tent. They went a little morbid in the end to try to get away from the whole they like Disney thing, but I appreciate that it worked out as a contribution.
Right. So since it's unlikely that the 4 hikers who were badly and in many cases fatally injured might not have been able to hike a mile downhill, it could have been the collapse of the snow cave in the ravine they were in that produced these injuries. Interestingly, though, Rustem actually was found making the way up the slope. He wasn't in the ravine. However, he was found with a fractured skull.
So what you would have to buy for all of the injuries to line up and make sense is that some people were injured, including Rustem, in the collapse of the snow onto the tent, but they were all not injured so badly that they couldn't make the mile hike to the tree line. And then the deadly injuries that we see in the group that went to the snow cave, those were caused by the collapse of the snow cave and them being crushed under snow on top of that still flowing creek. Mm-hmm. So they would have to have the shittiest of luck ever because some of them were partially crushed and beaten up in the collapse of the snow slab onto the tent. And then the rest of them were beaten up even worse in the collapse of another structure later on. So you have to buy that there are 2 separate snow collapses that caused injuries of different levels. And you know what? I get it if that's weird and kind of a lot to buy into.
It's very interesting, and it's just really tragic too, to think that this would have been caused by 2 extreme events that caused terrible bodily injury.
Absolutely. And the New Yorker article made a really, really interesting point that is even more tragic in that a less experienced group that wasn't full of like a bunch of rank 2, like badass Russian skiers and hikers might have survived because they didn't know what they were doing. Like, the more you get into winter hiking and going on mountains and these extended, like, long ski trips, the more you realize that avalanches are a big deal and they'll fucking kill you. Like without a second thought, all of that snow coming down will just crush you into bits.
Right.
So they all had a very real fear of that happening. And when they saw the collapse of that slab and this 1,000 pounds of snow come down and then saw that snow probably start to tumble down the mountain, they thought, oh God, maybe an avalanche is going to happen because it's already starting. And then they make the retreat. An inexperienced group wouldn't have done that, wouldn't have known that that's such a risk. An inexperienced group wouldn't have known to build into deep snow and wouldn't have made that snow structure that collapsed and ended up killing them. If they hadn't followed everything to the letter, if they hadn't known the real danger they were in, ironically, they might have survived.
Right. Something very interesting that I stop to think about occasionally is they are so experienced, and clearly Igor, Rustim, and Zena all thought that they would be able to make that 1 mile hike back to the tent.
Yeah.
It's strange that none of them made it.
It might play into some of those partial theories we were talking about earlier. They might not have been in a right mind with the hypothermia they were dealing with and might not have realized how exhausted they were or even how far away the tent was. It's like when we were in the San Diego Zoo and you were leading us down a path where we walked downhill for 40 minutes. And I was just looking at you like, I wonder if she realizes innately that we're going to have to walk all the way back up this at some point in order to leave.
You had to carry me to the pretzel stand.
That is correct. We wouldn't have made it if it weren't for that pretzel stand.
Oh, thank God.
And as a person with a bum knee, I'll also say their experience might have got them killed, but for the third Yuri's sake, his fucked up leg saved his life.
That's true. So it seems like no matter what theory you subscribe to, a lot of really rare, uncommon events had to have happened to cause all of this. However, that being said, like, however rare these events are, they still occur. So it's just way safer to stay inside and watch Ancient Aliens all day.
I've been trying to avoid that conclusion in my own head the entire time researching this. Like, don't decide that it's better to stay inside all the time. Don't think that the only way to survive is never to leave your house. But thank you for that. Thank you for bringing me there.
I'm sorry, but have we had an episode where something tragic happened and people were just in their house? I don't think so.
Parents. But that was all fake. Fuck.
Rude. They survived 10 years in a haunted house. They were chilling.
I survived 1 year in a house that we found a scorpion in once.
Honestly.
Yeah. Who's the bigger man?
The scorpion. So if just Cullen and I have one problem with this theory of the slab avalanche, it's this. If Dyatlov Pass was really just a natural disaster, why did the Soviets work so hard to cover it up?
I really don't know. And there is a lot of evidence to show that they tampered with the case.
So it is interesting because even if it is because they didn't have the ELSA technology or like a more viable explanation that a slab avalanche would be, there obviously has to be some sketchy shit going on, even if it didn't occur in this incident, for them to be like, oh, could it be like some bad government things that we do?
If only we had a weird, big-eyed, braided blonde girl to show up and show us how snow moves around.
True. So from the moment the hiking group's bodies were found, Soviet government agents took control of the search and investigation. And something I brought up to you from the bedtime story source, the day they found the bodies was 7 days into the search. And that happened to be the day that the Russian military joined the search.
Suddenly they were very interested once some bodies started to turn up.
I don't know. So investigators and medical examiners alike said that they were told to report the incident as a natural disaster and to keep their opinions out of the findings. The case was closed as quickly, mundanely, and vaguely as possible. Like we said, their final conclusion was a compelling natural force. Very sketchy. A lot of government, police agencies will go to medical examiners, go to coroners and be like, say this was an accident or say this was a suicide, you know? That seems to have a big impact on the case and a big step in covering things up.
And I do wonder if your fervent belief in aliens would have caused you a little bit of rough water as a forensic pathologist.
No.
Never. You would have fought the man. You would have gotten the truth out there.
I'm literally Spooky Mulder, okay? I'm Spooky Maddie. I'm spooky. That's why. That's my fucking name.
He legally changed it
to Spooky Maddie.
Spooky.
Goths are the most oppressed group. Did you notice that shit all started going wrong with my job when there was an icebreaker question that's what's one word to describe you, and I said spooky?
Wow.
It makes you think.
They weren't ready for you to expose them, expose their nuptials to the world.
Damien Eccles is my idol. And that's actually a fact.
Wow. You definitely didn't become obsessed with the West Memphis 3 because you had a crush on any of the boys.
Oh my God. Sometimes you don't realize how well your partner knows you, and it's just insane. It's like, you were right. We are soulmates.
I've been living in a house of lies.
Damien Eccles was 18 at the time.
That's the part you want to run back. Not, hey, Cullen, come watch 5 documentaries about the West Memphis 3 while I don't know what you were doing, but it seems gross.
Here's the fucked up thing is Cullen
all of it.
Is Cullen had to watch their very graphic, very tragic documentaries. Cullen had to watch the part where tragically the dead boys' bodies were discovered so he could tell me when to open my eyes and when to cover them.
Yeah, that's my role. That's what I get.
I didn't want to see it. I don't want to see it.
I wonder if Damien was here. Would he have to?
I wouldn't bring it up because I respect him.
Wow.
And everyone has a past.
Jesus Christ.
Everyone has a past, Cullen. And let's think about the fact that you didn't do any work in our physics in high school. So think about that.
Wow. Wow. She's pulling out all the stops to try to get out of this one.
So, of course, the question is, what were they trying to hide? So, according to guides in the area and Russians who visit Dyatlov Pass tend to believe one of two things.
The Russians are real as fuck for believing these two theories.
So first, many believe the group was caught up in deadly Cold War shenanigans. If you have listened to any of our other episodes taking place in this time, you know Cold War shenanigans come up. If you remember, Semyon Alexander Zolotaryov was the oldest member of the group, and he was the one added last minute by the university. Zolotaryov had military background, and it seems that the military history had some unexplained gaps in it.
You think he took a year off to go travel around?
Yeah, gap year, yeah.
Took a year to just sort of like chill out in his apartment, play San Andreas.
No, he took a year to travel Europe, see Perry.
Nice. Yeah, from dark alleys and Soviet spy planes.
Such gaps were common in the records of soldiers with classified assignments, such as the Special Forces or KGB. So interestingly, Yuri Yudin, who was the group member who left due to health issues before everything went down, does believe that like a special force agent or operant actually was involved in the incident. So, you know, the member of the group does believe that there was some sketchy government stuff going on.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Like we said, this theory does have a lot of credence, does have a lot of people who believe it.
Yeah.
I would say especially Yuri Yudin backing it. That is big.
Definitely.
So we might never know why Zolotaryov was added to the trip, but many Russians seem to believe, due to the group's planned route, education, or affiliations that they were targeted by U.S. or Soviet black forces. Once they were out in the middle of the woods, the group was brought out of their tents and killed. With complete control over the investigation, no evidence suggesting murder would be allowed to surface.
I don't know how just Cullen to get with it, but that is the catch-all for these cover-up theories, is that they had control over the explanation and could tell people what to report.
But it's true.
It is true.
And there are cases where, of course, we know cover-ups happen. Of course.
That's true.
And there are a ton of cover-ups we don't know. That's what I don't get. We have proof that the CIA did crazy stuff, but then you won't believe that they're lizard people.
I guess it's the jump that I have trouble with.
It's the lizard in this.
As far as Yuri Yudin, too, I really do hope that if I ever die under bizarre circumstances, my friends will believe and tell everyone it was some cool shit like that.
Oh, I would be like the government, especially since you work for
Especially because you were probably the one that killed me.
Whenever I go out, I keep a piece of paper in my pocket that says Cullen did it. So if I die, you get put in prison. So you don't remarry.
Oh, I see. Very good.
Yeah.
Great.
You promised.
And you want to be putting this on the record? I didn't.
You promised.
I did not.
You promised you wouldn't murder me. That's true. Right? Oh my God. Right, Cullen? Oh. I do feel like I had something else to say.
Damien Eccles is so cute when he's in chains.
He was goth. He didn't give a fuck.
Oh my fucking God.
Oh my fucking goth.
You have a sickness.
Yeah. A mental sickness, literally. Okay.
Yeah.
You're making fun of my mental illness.
If it's manifesting itself in a crush on Damien Eccles, then yes, I am making fun of it. That's correct.
Oh my God. That's so rude. I was weird before, and because my parents are weird too, okay? My dad loves aliens.
How dare you drag them in on this?
I'm dragging them in. My mom gave me an Edgar Allan Poe book when I was 10.
That does not compare to what you're doing.
Speaking my truth. So another theory going off of this that I have seen is that one or two people within the hiking group, people believe it would be Semyon Alexander Zolotaryov, possibly Igor Dyatlov. Maybe they had a plan to meet with some intelligence agency, whether that be the Soviet Union Special Forces or U.S. intelligence. And of course, things got out of hand. Maybe others in the group who were unaware of this meeting of information would have gone against it, caused conflict. That's just another variation that I've seen.
And certainly the backgrounds of the entire hiking group would make them relevant to the situation at the time. They were all highly educated people in very sensitive fields at the time.
Right. It's so interesting. They were all in the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk. Igor was a radio engineer. We have nuclear physicists.
Mechanical engineering, always important
and
cool and important.
Cool.
And deserving
you're cool.
of respect.
Industrial engineering.
Nah.
Yeah, you always talk shit about other engineering. And it's wow, that's...
Mechanical's the best. Fucking come at me. All that an industrial engineer does is figure out the ways to build the shit I came up with.
Stop. I literally have to hear this shit constantly. You're like, biomedical engineer?
You good luck finding a job, cuck.
Oh my God. It's so fucking hard to find a job out there, Cullen. Your privilege is showing. Okay.
I threw my entire life away to get a high-paying job.
You
so
fucking hate your job.
Yeah, but I get paid. But I get paid money for
money, cash. Like I said in the last episode, though.
Do you like our fancy things? Do you like the fancy
we
things?
We don't have as much fancy things as I thought we would.
I'm not that wealthy.
Yeah. If you feel bad for us for having sadness, donate to our Patreon, donate to our PayPal down below.
Mm-hmm. I will also quit my job.
It's called retirement. I'm retired.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so a second popular theory in this whole large government cover-up conspiracy type idea fills in more gaps and follows the pattern of most cover-ups, which would be hiding incompetence. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was in a mad rush to develop weapons to rival the United States, a la Cold War. Weapon testing was a regular occurrence, and some reports say that missile tests were being conducted in the Ural Mountains around the time of the hikers' expedition. Observers in the region described odd, unexplained lights in the sky in the days surrounding the incident, and people in the Dyatlov group seem to have tried to take photos of lights in the sky. Like we said, a camera was found, and one of the last photos, if not, I think
it was the last
photo, seems to be a picture of the night sky, and there seems to be a light source.
Now, before you get too excited, though, remember, this is a suspected, like, supernatural photo, so the quality is as low as it can possibly be. But yeah, it seems to be some light or possibly light streaks on a black background, probably a night sky.
I mean, the camera was left out in the freaking snow for a long time, okay? It's gonna be damaged.
It's somehow still better than the other photo we'll talk about in a minute.
That's true. So it could have been that Semyon Alexander Zolotaryov was sent with the hiking group, as we alluded to earlier, to keep them out of trouble. For example, if he had information of where weapons testing would be, to kind of keep the group away from said weapons testing.
Yeah.
However, possibly due to the weather delays they experienced, the group may have found themselves on an accidental test range. A near miss of the missile tests would have panicked the group, possibly even burned or injured some of them. And rather than admit to the faux pas, the incident was covered up, survivors and all.
You like how I called accidentally shooting at your own citizens with the experimental missile a faux pas?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is a common theory, and I do believe it. We're in the Cold War. A lot of crazy, kooky weapons were being tested. Could explain why the group freaked out. If you're hearing like fucking missiles falling, being shot next to you, you're going to want to escape.
Even seeing them being like shot over you, pretty worrying.
Yeah, and interestingly, and this could align, of course, with a lot of different theories, one of the photos before the incident showed one of the hikers in a burnt jacket. So then again, it probably would have been in their logbook. So it's like, I got burnt by a missile. But still explains some of the stranger injuries, could explain trauma, burns.
Radiation.
So, of course, the big mystery is what threats could have panicked the group to the point of abandoning their only hope for survival. That really is one of the cruxes of the story. Why did they not just leave their tent, but flee their tent?
Yeah.
Cut it open from the inside and flee. Is it possible that the land was cursed? The mountain was named Dead Mountain by the natives, after all. According to the YouTube channel Bedtime Stories, the Mansi people told of a legend involving 9 hikers dying on the same slope in mysterious and gruesome circumstances hundreds of years before the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Interesting.
Additionally, in 1991, a plane carrying 9 people crashed in the area, killing everyone. So, you know, what is up with the number 9, death, and these mountains?
They call it the day the polka died.
That is terrible. So this little fact, I know you guys love it when I say something and then I'm like, actually, that's not true. So I actually did do research into this supposed 1991 plane crash. I could not find any reliable source that confirmed anything close to a plane crashing in 1991 in this area with 9 fatalities. So take that with the largest grain of salt known to man.
And if it did actually happen in 1991, I'd also like to make a correction. It wouldn't be the day the polka died. It would be the day the hard bass died.
I don't really follow Russian music.
Racist?
Okay. So another theory that gets brought up, I'm sure you were waiting for it. If you believe some investigators' analysis of one of the hikers' photos, the answer could be simple. The hiking group was killed by a Yeti.
A Yeti.
A Yeti. One of the photos found in the group's damaged camera show a menacing, hunched silhouette among the snow-covered trees. Could it possibly be that they captured their assailant, aka the Yeti, on film? The untraveled reaches of the frigid Kolevotov, or Dead Mountain, sound like the perfect habitat for the Yeti.
A couple of issues. Am I allowed to?
No. Let me
right.
finish making my case
Gotcha.
here, okay?
Sure.
The injuries present on some of the hikers could also be evidence of the attack. The coroner was careful to specify that the blunt force trauma scene could not have been inflicted by a human, but a hulking 8-foot humanoid ape protecting his territory would have been more than enough strength for the task.
He did not specify that it wasn't a hulking humanoid ape.
True.
That could have been it.
Compelling natural force, if I'd say so.
Can we go for my couple of questions, couple of issues? Yeah. Picture is not of a white like Yeti.
Sustained.
First of all. Sustained.
Wait, what's the opposite of objected?
Objected.
Objectified.
Usually you have to list what you're objecting to exactly.
Objectify.
Okay. Instead, it's more of a brown shape, like how they were dressed. Mm-hmm. Also, the hulking shape, while it is kind of funly in the Bigfoot crouch walking pose.
Yeah.
It's also not that tall. Doesn't look like there's trees around for reference. It kind of looks like the height of a dude. Mm-hmm. And also the tent was cut open from the inside. A bunch of them froze. Why would the Yeti bury them underneath a bunch of snow? Why wouldn't the Yeti eat
Hide
them?
the evidence. Not hungry. Let me objectify you for a second. So a lot of cryptozoologists have studied the photo and they don't necessarily think it's a Yeti. It definitely looks like a man in a big coat you'd be in a big coat if you were hiking the Ural Mountains. Mm-hmm. So I did see that cryptozoologists were like, proportions are all off for a Yeti. So
it's weird that cryptozoologists and people who believe in that fun side of things in general, once something gets too popular to call it a cryptid, they kind of turn their back on it, you know? They're kind of hipstery in that way. This is one of the better cases for a Yeti, but they're nah. No.
You have to be so choosy, so picky, so selective with what you believe. I told you, Ancient Aliens is a racist psyop.
Yes, you have been yelling that, but I don't see the connection. Please elaborate.
Okay, so there are a lot of people who think that conspiracy theorists and cryptozoologists, which I wanted to be a cryptozoologist when I was little, that they're just a loopy, off their rocker, you really believe Hillary Clinton is a reptile. That's a psyop. I've told you this again and again. It's definitely true that the government or the people who run shit are projecting the voices of people who say stupid shit. Did you know aliens are Hillary Clinton? And then people are what? All ufologists are stupid. But that's not true.
I actually kind of do believe that.
Yeah.
I do believe that they promote the most extreme versions of conspiracy theorists in order to discredit the mass.
Yeah. So what you'll see is that all this parapsychology is not taken seriously, and I think that is purposeful. But I feel real cryptozoologists who literally want to study Yetis, they will be selective. You will see professionals in it being no, that's not good evidence. And we're not just gonna take everything we can get,
So your official Spooky Maddie take on this is Dyatlov Pass was probably not caused by a Yeti, but keep an eye out for Selena.
I didn't say it wasn't caused by a Yeti.
Well, okay.
I said the picture wasn't a Yeti.
Gotcha. So this photo wasn't a Yeti, but
I didn't
don't
say.
let it discredit other possible Yeti appearances and contributions.
The photo wasn't a Yeti. That's all I got to say.
Wow. Brave.
So we've mentioned before that investigators were not allowed to voice their true feelings on what happened to the Dyatlov group. Well, in 1990, Lev Ivanov, a principal investigator in the original case, released an article with his theory titled, quote, "The Enigma of the Fireballs," end quote.
The fucking coolest name in this story of cool names.
My mom's softball team she played on when she was a little girl were called the Fireballs.
That's nice.
It's cute.
That's very cute.
So records state that many witnesses in the area spotted strange orange orbs in the sky the night surrounding the Dyatlov incident. There have been reports of sky orbs, sky spheres on the nights of February 1st, February 2nd, the night that it is believed most passed away. The Dyatlov hikers' final photographs were of streaks and balls of light on the night sky. Investigators found not only burned bodies, but Ivanov said that the trees in the area may have been burned as well.
That's called an hour-and-a-half foreshadowing.
True. So what happened that night? The Dyatlov group was attacked by the heat weapons of an extraterrestrial craft.
A UFO tracked and attacked them with a heat ray. Let's go into what could have happened.
UFE-54 fun, baby. Was that good?
It was something
It
for
was
sure.
clever.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, he said it. He said it was clever. Oh, my boy. He said it was clever. As the group hunkered into a night on the mountain, they began witnessing UFOs buzzing overhead. Perhaps after trying to take photographs, the craft focused in on them, firing its heat ray on the hikers. Panicked, the group fled to the tree line for cover. The alien craft continued to fire its heat weapon, burning the trees and a few of the hikers. Those same 2 burned bodies would later have radiation detected on their clothing. So just to get into specifics, like we said, radiation was found on at least 2 of the clothing that the hikers in the ravine were wearing, specifically Kolevotov, but that clothing was found to belong to the 2 Yuris, I believe. So Doroshenko and Kravonoschenko.
that is to say, across a lot of these theories, we think that the 2 naked bodies that were at the cedar tree had their clothing removed by other members.
So from the point of running away, trying to gain cover from the UFO, the group would have been exhausted and lost in the storm. Some would hopelessly attempt to return to their tent, while others burrowed into the snow.
Absolutely. And we have the ultimate tale of no pictures, please.
Damn. Yeah, interesting. A lot of times UFOs aren't very aggressive. There are cases of UFOs believed to be extraterrestrials causing people harm. I think that, of course, like a heat ray or a fireball could explain, of course, the burns, possibly radiation, but I think that they would have also had other weapons that could have caused intense trauma that we see in the 4 hikers in the ravine.
Very, very possibly. It could even be a combined effect. The principal investigator who released the badassly named The Enigma of the Fireballs said that he believed that the heat ray affected different items in different capacities, which is why the clothes wouldn't have been burnt on the bodies, but the bodies were burnt while the trees were also burnt, perhaps because both were like organic material.
Right.
And like Maddie just said, they could have also had concussive effects that, fractured skulls and fractured ribs.
I'm not sure that the UFO theory is given as much credence as it should be. It is very strange. You have documented reports of people in the area in that night seeing orbs in the sky. As far as I can tell, it's of course theorized that that could be comets or something, but it's never confirmed as far as I have found.
Absolutely. And if we're talking about psyops, there has been a kind of odd trend progressing from the 1950s when these sightings began to nowadays, where you almost never hear anyone claiming that like there's heat rays or people being abducted violently or being subjected to like experimentation. You don't hear that anymore. Now they're almost always peaceful. They're just seen overhead. Sometimes people lose a little bit of time. But for some reason, all of those older stories of like altercations with UFOs have disappeared.
Yeah, it is very interesting to think. You know, in the US, a lot of stuff is happening with official documents being released saying, like, yeah, there are unidentified flying objects. It is interesting that there's not too much effort anymore to cover up like lights in the sky, you know, being
Right.
like, oh, yeah, we don't really know. But if it were a case like the Dyatlov Pass incident where it unfortunately caused people's deaths, if it was a UFO, like that makes sense that it would be covered up. That would be a next level of panic, I would say, from civilians.
Absolutely. It's almost like we're being eased into the idea.
Yeah. So like I said, I think that this actually does have a lot of credence, and it's not really given enough credit that there were the reports of things seen in the sky that night. There were, of course, you know, the inhuman injuries, literally having trauma that has not really been explained, of extreme force, as well as the picture. You know, I'm discrediting the Yeti picture, but I will say that it is strange that that night there's only just the one picture of like the night sky and you can see a light source. It is strange, and you have to wonder why they were even taking pictures.
Yeah, what were they trying to take a photo of? Because they were trying to photograph something.
Yeah, so honestly, I do think that this theory actually, at least coincidentally, lines up with a lot of circumstances that we have seen in this case.
Yeah, and for all of these theories, including the UFO and the weapons test and Cold War shenanigans, there seems like there must be something in addition to the baseline theory that we covered that's been kind of bolstered since 2019, because there was something covered up. There's some information that just isn't fully explained.
Right. And even if it wasn't caused by weapons testing or UFO, the fact that the Soviet government was covering it up, it's like, well, why? Like, what did you think it could be? Like, what would there be ever to cover up? Something that you and I have talked about this case. Why did they test for radiation? Why was that test ordered?
The medical examiner sent a letter being like, why is the government requesting I do radiation tests on their clothes? What relevance does that possibly have to this hiking group that died in the mountains? And they were essentially told, don't ask questions, do what you're told, and report that it was natural causes.
Yeah, you have to admit that that is very strange that they thought the possibility of like, oh, they're deceased. Does radiation have anything to do with it?
And even if that's as small as there were weapons tests going on adjacent, and then this group met the fate that they met and everything was explained through natural causes, there's still some tampering there that's not fully brought to light.
Right. Well, whatever theory you believe, we always think it's good to take a moment to remember the real people behind the story and the real tragedy that occurred, the real effect that this had on so many of their family members and loved ones. In this case, of course, they were 9 adventurous, talented men and women who, for the most part, were exactly like us, young college students looking for adventure. But they were 10 times cooler.
At least 10 times cooler than
10
us.
times more able-bodied,
Yeah,
at least.
fitter, more adventurous. I remember taking one hike in college, and it was like a walk to the top of the glorified hill that is Tumamoc. Mm-hmm. And I think I almost puked halfway up on my friend and his girlfriend because I had stayed up drinking the night before.
Oh, yeah.
And just didn't have the fortitude to make it.
We were walking around just a fucking town on our trip to Denver, and I was crying because we wouldn't stop for ice cream and my legs hurt.
So we have nothing but respect for the Dyatlov group.
Definitely. And, you know, like we said so many times before, such a sensationalized and popular case, we really just ask that you take the time to really just internalize that these were real people and this was a huge, real tragedy of lives that were senselessly taken.
Absolutely. Well, do you want to reveal to the people at the end what you believe happened?
Yeah. Would you tell me what you believe for the Dyatlov Pass incident, and then I'll...
Well, looking over my options, I think I'll have to go with Cullen's no fun nerd theory from 2020 or 2019. I mean, everything kind of makes sense. Even the burns, which we didn't cover, was probably... They burned themselves trying to get warm in the fire. Basically, all of the injuries between the two snow collapses are explained. I don't see anything strange except for the Soviet cover-up, but that could be any number of factors. They were really jumpy back in the day.
That's fair. So you believe it was definitely like a slab avalanche that they thought was...
Yeah, I think a slab avalanche, and then obviously... I mean, it's all but confirmed that the snow structure, the little hidey hole they dug, collapsed, and that probably killed that remainder of the group.
Well, it is still, presumably, there were some injuries from the slab avalanche.
There must have been.
It is incredible that the 5 injured, so Rustim, Zolotaryov, Kolevotov, Ludmila, and Nikolai, that they survived that long. I mean, Rustim was hiking back and he had a fractured skull. It just goes to show that, of course, it is strange that they had these injuries, but they were so strong and like such fighters and so experienced and able-bodied.
Absolutely.
That being said, I think it's aliens.
Hell yeah. Sick. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode for this month. Keep an eye on our socials. We'll be releasing little clips and stuff perhaps.
I quit my job so I could focus on the podcast, so please give us money. Can I just lie? Is that allowed?
Well, you did quit your job, and we are trying to focus on the podcast. These are both true.
And we do need your money. We need you to give us money. Not really.
Nah, we're all right.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoy. If you are enjoying, just tell someone, because, you know, we put a lot of work in. It'd be cool if more people were able to, you know, like enjoy the content that we're trying to put together.
True. We're proud of it. We think it's fun. So if you want to tell a friend, that would go a long way.
And I'll say, believe that my lack of physical fitness, my lack of expertise, my broken, shitty body will all save my life. And not be a detriment, and in fact, my greatest asset.
Wow.
And believe in yourself.
I want to say believe in the Yeti, but not in this case. And in fact, believe that the Yetis, like other humanoid large apes, are most likely peaceful. And believe in yourself.
We've been Anomalous.
And we will continue to be anomalous.
We'll be anomalous
bitch.
as long as you can't figure our shit out. We zig when you zag, motherfucker.
We were, are, and will be anomalous.
Goodbye. See you in a few weeks.
Bye, bitch.
Bye, bitch.